The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
New episode of the Game of Zen podcast. My name is Scott Berman, checking in from Philadelphia, PA. And as always, I'm joined by Sensei Paul. What's new out in Boulder, and how's it going there?
Hey, Scott, it's good. Hey, Scott, actually, I think you started too soon. I think we need to do it again.
Well, okay. You know what I noticed last time was that I actually started too late, and there was a little bit of pause in between the intro and me saying hello.
Okay.
I was too slow last time, but maybe I was too fast this time.
Yeah, because I came back and you were halfway through that sentence. So
okay, I'll wait. Yeah, I did that on purpose, but I guess I did overcorrected.
Okay.
How do we edit this and go back?
I think we could just roll, because we can trim at the beginning in this.
So I could run the new intro.
Yeah.
Again. Okay. Yeah. Wait, so you're saying that I came in and it was still going?
When I came in, right at the end of the intro, you had already said a few words.
Okay.
Welcome to, yeah.
All right. I'll wait a little longer. Last time though, there wasn't too much of a gap, so I just gotta.
Weird.
Yeah, when I listened to it on Spotify, and it was like and then it ended, and then there was like 4 or 5 seconds before I said hello.
Interesting.
So
okay.
I didn't, but I'll try it again, and we can just see how it sounds. By the way, is it good when I say I'm Scott from Philadelphia, PA, and I'm with? Do you want me to say? I know I change it up. Like sometimes I say my good friend Paul. I just said Sensei Paul. What would be the best way to say?
You mix it up, whatever comes to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know because sometimes I say friend, and then this time I'm like, let me throw in Sensei.
That's good.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Here we go.
The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. My name is Scott Berman, checking in here from Philadelphia, PA. As always, I'm joined by Sensei Paul, Zen master from Boulder. What's up, Paul? How's it going?
Hey, Scott. Happy New Year. Things are going really good. Yeah, really happy to start 2025. 2024 was kind of a chaotic year in retrospect, and I'm really looking forward to getting a new start.
Happy New Year to you too, and to all of our listeners. And today we're going to do a 2-part series. Today's recording, we're going to talk about aging and how it relates to Zen and Buddhism. And we're going to discuss how it relates to our parents, ourselves, our children, and just society in general, and how do we deal with that. Part 2, which we're going to record in a week or so, is going to be talking about 2025 and vows and intentions. This is the time of year for New Year's resolutions. We're going to take that to a deeper level and talk about how Zen and Buddhism play into, your resolutions for next year or this year. So, Paul, let's start off by talking about what does Zen and Buddhism talk about aging? How does it give us tools and tactics to deal with it over time?
Well, I think the primary thing is the teaching of impermanence. One of the 3 seals of Buddhism, that it's the nature of everything to not be fixed and to change. So really coming to terms with this in a lived sense is part of the wisdom, the Dharma of Buddhism itself. And aging is the primary way in which we kind of experience that in our life, is the changingness of our physical bodies and our minds as we get older. So it's a real, gift to be able to look at growth and aging, with that kind of mind, with the perspective of mind. It's also it's really challenging. In some ways, you could say it's the biggest challenge, is to work with change, aging, and death. To have things not only just change. Change itself is difficult, but everybody's changing, and teenagers are changing, and their conditions aren't permanent. But to have that kind of quality of decline that goes along with the aging process, as we start to lose our faculties, we start to lose our physical abilities. So life in some ways appears to be more diminished and more limited. And then, of course, we start to lose people, and people die and go away, which is perhaps the biggest pain that we can experience, is that the grief associated with a loved one passing away. So how to be with that with the greatest heart and wisdom is right at the center, really, of Buddhist practice.
That's fantastic. And I think about aging occurs obviously from the day you're born, and the changes are you're a child, and then you're a toddler and a teenager and so on. The aging related stress or anxiety or whatever you want to call it, it changes based on where you are. So obviously, senior citizens, 70, 80-year-old, have different things to deal with than teenagers, but they're also dealing with aging and becoming adults. And how does that play into it? And I think that one thing about my practice is, as I've gotten older, I've realized that this is super important to deal with my own aging, but also those around me, and death. And so the more that I learn about it, the better I get at dealing with it. So my next question is about the Four Noble Truths really talk about suffering and the causes of it. How does Buddhism offer a path of liberation from this suffering? Because I know we talk about anger and fear and things like that, but aging's sort of a different category.
Is it?
Or maybe not. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because I think as we age, we our cravings and our desires become perhaps even more to the fore, and we have to let go of what is going. We have to welcome in what is coming. And we have to, ignorance being the third poison, we have to really, we have an opportunity to see more clearly into what this life is all about. So to relieve ourselves from the suffering that's caused by our ignorance and our not seeing our true nature, we have an opportunity to see more clearly, who exactly we are, what this life is all about. So I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it did. And I want to also just talk about stuff that I know you and I have dealt with over the last year or so, and your parents are quite old at this point and dealing with different illnesses and situations. And unfortunately, my mom passed away in July. And so I think this year was a lot of dealing with old parents and medical issues and things like that. And so how does this play into your care for your parents now? And how has that changed over time?
Yeah. Well, my parents are in their mid 80s, and they're in a stage of, I would say, kind of progressive decline. I mean, there've been a few acute episodes that they've gone into the hospital for, but it hasn't been life-threatening matters. So it's kind of a progressive decline, physically primarily for my father, and mentally primarily for my mom, who's got Alzheimer's. And that's advanced fairly significantly over the last year. Boy, there's just so much opportunity for love and compassion and heart to be with aging parents who want to maintain a connection with their kids, which my parents do. So for me, it's been I don't know, it's been obviously difficult in just a physical sense, but in an emotional sense, in terms of an emotional process, I think it's been just an amazing process for all of us. That's my two parents and then my three siblings along with me. It's just an incredible gift, to go through it all together, I guess I would say.
Do you talk about your teachings and Zen with your siblings or your parents, or do you sort of just apply it without bringing up Buddha?
Yeah, it's more the latter.
Okay.
They know me to be a Buddhist teacher, and they respect it very much, and they really connect with it to the degree. But I don't bring anything, really overtly in. It's just, my I'm just meeting the situation, and I think, on occasion they'll take some wisdom from perhaps what I'm how I'm responding to it, but also I would just say they bring out their own wisdom. My
Mhm.
mom is kind of like a Buddhist without being formally a Buddhist, and I've learned more as much from her as she's learned from me. The way I see her handling her own aging process is incredible. It's just incredible. I think I might have mentioned on a previous podcast, one thing she said a number of years ago, as her dementia was just starting to kick in. She said, you got to make confusion your friend.
Wow, that's powerful.
And it's really powerful. And there's a saying from Zen Master Joshu, Chinese master going back about a millennia. He said, "I do not abide in clarity." And I see that to be the same thing as my mom saying, make confusion
Wow.
your friend. Don't fight it. Don't look for some sort of, clarity or control or some sort of deep understanding of what all is going on, to really surrender to what's happening
Wow.
with your mind,
Mhm.
um, is a really great practice and a really great gift. And my mom is managing that very gracefully.
That's awesome. I mean, it's a gift for you guys too, for the kids, because that could be a very stressful thing. I'm sure it is anyway, but just the fact that she's dealing with that way gives you a little bit more peace of mind, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely so. And she was a professional geriatric nurse specialist, with a
Mhm.
master's in geriatric nursing, because her mother, my grandmother, also had Alzheimer's. Um, and so my mom is actually a professional, caregiver for Alzheimer's families,
Wow.
if that was the second part of her career. So she's actually very wise around the process. She knows what's going on with her, better than we
Mm.
do. And she's kind of educating us on how to work
Yeah.
with her and handle her. So yeah, we've kind of had that. It's a great gift. Um, yeah.
So, and you watching her, then I'm sure you've learned some things that you can apply to your later stages of life. I mean, I think
Yeah.
about it that way too, is that you see how they deal with that, and then you say, well, someday I'm going to be hopefully in mid 80s, and I might have similar things to deal with, and I can learn something from how they dealt with it.
Exactly. I hope that I'll deal with it with the grace that my mom is,
Yeah.
and I don't presume that I will. To be honest, I'll share that, one of my lineage elders, Bernie Glassman Roshi, he's passed away a few years ago, and a few years before he passed, he had a pretty major stroke, which took out a lot of his faculties. And it took him a long time just to get back to be able to talk and function, which he was able to do with some level then before he did end up passing away. But he, a Zen master of the greatest, depth and attainment of realization, of his true self. He said, wow, this stroke is like the biggest teaching I've ever had to face, to
Hmm.
lose the faculty of mind, to lose his ability to speak, and he had many breakthroughs in terms of his own understanding. And yet he said that aging was a whopper of a teacher, for him. So I expect that to be the case for myself as well.
So I think a very similar thing happened with Thich Nhat Hanh
Mm.
as well, because he had a stroke, I think, in his 80s or so on, and they thought he was going to die at that point, and he survived. and he lived for, I think, another close to 10 years. And over that time, he wrote more books, and he communicated. He couldn't speak, but he communicated in his own way. And it was the same kind of thought that the Buddhist teachings and dealing with it, it's like the mindfulness, you have to even be 100 times more mindful, I guess, of like everything that's going around on you when you can't communicate normally. And that had to be so hard, but also the teachings and the practice probably helped them deal with that.
Absolutely. It's about letting go. It's a letting go of these things. It's letting go of who we think we are, but it's also letting go of these things that we can do. Letting go of these faculties. And there's so much more. My teacher, all through my training, and my teacher would always be saying, okay, we'll let go of that. Now let go of that. Now let go of that. And that's the Dharma here, is that everything ultimately will be taken from you. Everything will be taken from you.
Yeah. And I just also wanted to comment on my situation, because my mom had cancer for 32 years on and off, and she fought like crazy, and we did every single thing we could try to stop it. And she had a great, unbelievably good attitude. And I learned so much from how she dealt with it. She kept her sense of humor until the last day. She was okay with it. When we finally realized there was nothing more we could do, she's like, okay, I'm ready. I've had a good fight. I've had 86 years. And it was very hard to listen to that, obviously, because she was completely alert and awake. But at the same time, I was like, it's okay, Mom, you can let go. And, I appreciated that she had that attitude at that point. And it definitely taught me some lessons. I don't know that I could deal with it like that, and I was very impressed. And she also prepared, my own mom also prepared for her passing years before. And I didn't even realize all these different things that she did in terms, she planned and paid for her own funeral. And she said, there's a folder in my drawer and everything's in there. And we went, and it was all spelled out. And it was like, that was a gift. But it's also just dealing with, she knew that life was impermanent, and having cancer that long, she figured, she didn't think she'd make it that long, was the point. So we were blessed that we had many more years with her, but also the way she went out was very inspiring, and definitely taught me things for the future.
Yeah.
It was sad too, of course.
Yeah, I know. Well, I watched you, move through your experience of your mother's passing, and you've been very close to her for many years. And I know that it was hard for you.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the teachings that you've given me and we've done through the podcast, because I definitely think that helps. And so I want to talk about specific things. Are there specific Buddhist teachings or Zen practices that deal with aging specifically?
Yeah, it's well, again, it's all about letting go. All about, letting go and being with the changes of ourselves, right? Seeing where we're holding on and clutching, and where we're pushing things away. And so it's all about aging, you could say, is just an intensification of the primary, lessons and practice of the Buddhist Dharma. It's where, to the point where in a lot of traditions, you don't even start seriously, doing spiritual work until you get to be, 45 or 50, and you get later on in your life. Zen happens to be, a discipline that is just, it invites those who are called to a really intense, practice, to do that starting now, wherever you are. Right. So, but aging is the circumstance that just makes the laboratory and the classroom, unavoidably vivid.
Yeah. And it's also, though, the more that you learn, I believe, the more that you think about this and prepare yourself for your own aging or your loved ones, then it does get a little bit better, and you do have more compassion, as you said earlier. But you can keep learning all the way to the end. I mentioned that my mom and I would talk about stuff in our last month or two, and I tried to bring things out about impermanence and letting go, and she was getting some of it, and she wasn't into Buddhism or anything, but some of the stuff that I was saying was hitting home with her, and I think that really helped. And I also just wanted to share a quick story about my uncle, who was Buddhist and was a big influence on me. Unfortunately, he got cancer in his mid-60s, and I went to visit him at the hospice right before he died, and he was reading a book. And I was talking to my cousin, and he's like, "Hey, listen, stop talking a minute. I don't have a lot of time left, and I want to read you guys this passage." And I was like, "Wow!" I'm like, "Okay," And he sat and read. And I wish I could remember the book, but he read us this very powerful thing about dying. So he was sitting there in his hospice bed reading about Buddhism and dying, and I was like, "Wow, he's still trying to." Right to the end, he's working on himself and all this, and that was inspired me to be on this constant learning thing. So I guess it doesn't really stop even if you get really old, right?
Right. Yeah. It gets more intense, and that story puts me in mind of maybe what you're looking for, like the specific teachings around aging. And I think the teaching of appreciating the moment, right,
Yes.
is one, and that's something that I think your uncle was kind of trying to convey, and certainly comes through in my mom's experience, is especially when you start losing your memory. And so you don't really, you can no longer appreciate what happened in the morning or yesterday, and you don't really have a good kind of grasp on what tomorrow is going to look like.
Yeah.
You're really, you're sort of forced in a way to appreciate the moment.
Yeah.
More and more. So that, that's kind of, I think, a teaching and a practice that can really help with the aging process. Is like, yeah, really, really appreciate this. And don't squander the opportunity. Don't squander the moment. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where the most important thing is. It's the quality of your relationship, your intimacy with loved ones. If you've been practicing that for whatever period of time, maybe your whole life, then that's going to bear fruit when you're aging.
I think mindfulness does play such a huge role in physical and mental changes that happen too. And I also think about the inevitability of it all, right? So I have this little thing when I go to a funeral, I sit and think a lot about the person, what they've taught me, and how I dealt with that person. And then as I'm driving away from the funeral, I think about it that I'm sad and upset about this, but it wasn't my funeral, and one day it will be. And so one day it'll be the other way around. And so I'm going to actually try and enjoy my mindfulness and be as present as I can be, because it'll be my turn at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think that helps, especially with loved ones, because mm-hmm. life is not the same after my parents are both gone now, and it's not going to be the same again. But at some point, it'll be my turn. So I think that's kind of helps me deal with the deaths that are around.
Yeah, definitely so. And also your own, there's a strong tradition in certain forms of Buddhism, including Zen, including Tibetan Buddhism, to actually meditate in the charnel grounds, mm-hmm. right? The cemetery is where the bones are decomposing and the bodies are decomposing. And actually to meditate, those are the strongest, can be the strongest meditations to really reflect on what this life is all about. So it brings up great appreciation. I was just reminded of something I remember. I think it was Ram Dass who mm-hmm. reputedly said, there's more awake people on death row in this country than there are, outside wow. of it. Maybe proportionally, per capita or something. And so it is just the truth that, proximity to death helps us wake up our minds and wake up our hearts to what this life is all about.
I also think, getting back to the causes of suffering, I think that being close or thinking about that, those other things that cause suffering become a lot less important.
Yeah.
Right. So anger and fear and jealousy and things like that. And when you really think about why you're suffering from something, And then you kind of turn it around and think about the limited time we all have here, and that we are going to get old and sick and die. Then, being angry at someone over something little that happened at work seems a lot less important, right?
That's exactly right. And it works at like the mental and the physical level, because you get this perspective shift, right, around what's important. But it's almost like your nervous system gets reconditioned when it does deal with the big things like life and death. Literally, you're not being triggered, and you're not as reactive when you're dealing with these smaller things, like whether the plane ticket was booked at the right time, or whether somebody had a freak out and you don't want to handle it. It's like literally your nervous system is taking those things more in stride when you've faced the bigger things.
It's also, I also notice in my time, like that, if I'm sick or not, or feeling off in whatever way, or I hurt my foot or whatever, all that matters really is the getting better. All I want to do is feel better tomorrow, and I want my broken finger to heal or whatever. And the aging and the sickness are really the number one thing. Being healthy and being here and being present, and the more the more you can focus on that and just be really happy about it every day that you have. And I think that's where impermanence and mindfulness really comes into play.
Yeah, it's right. Suffering in that way, has a way of focusing the mind. So, and doing that, it also kind of focuses the heart, and with great benefit, great benefit.
I want to ask you about our society and the way and maybe just our country too, the way we deal with aging and death. It seems like a lot of times we don't have the right things in place, and we don't handle it with dignity many times. And the healthcare system has got its issues. And I know that a lot of countries are assisted suicide is actually, euthanasia, whatever. I forget the actual term, but anyway, it's really becoming more popular around the world. And I think that we don't really deal with it properly, or we don't talk about it. And how can Buddhist principles really improve the way people look at death and dying?
Yeah, very much so. I think, I'd maybe even be more critical than you were just implying around the way our culture deals with death. It's very much in denial. It almost, it's very scared of death. It pushes it away. It hides it. There's no honoring of the wisdom and beauty of death, and allowing, people's elderhood, aging, and deaths to inform, the rest of us, people's deaths. And if you've ever spent time with someone dying, it's such a gift. It's such a gift to be with someone going through that. They're giving a gift of their process that can change your life, really. And, as you may know, Scott, I'm on the board of a contemplative care center, which focuses on conscious dying and conscious caregiving. And so people who work in that capacity, they work in hospices, they work in end of life, care facilities, when they have that perspective. And most of our culture and our medical establishment doesn't have that. It's very sort of, well, there's nothing we can do about this kind of attitude, instead of actually seeing it for what it is, which is this profound opportunity for sharing in life, right? To have the death inform the life, and have the life inform the death. It's a whole, so to, be a little bit more specific, say Buddhist principles inform this process. Well, Buddhist principles say that, life and death aren't separate the way we think of them to be, right? I mean, they're in some ways, they're different forms of the same thing. Death is inside of life, and life is inside of death. But our normative view, which is death is the end of life, is an ignorant view from the Buddhist perspective. That's not it. So to wake up to the fact of seeing the death in life, which is what impermanence is about, right? Things dying and changing and shifting, and then to see what is alive within the death, Not only what, say, lasts beyond a person dying, but the life that is conveyed within others and to the world through that dying. That's all going on. That's always kind of going on. And that's the perspective I'd like culturally, is hopefully will arise more and more. And there's institutions, like I have a good friend who runs an organization called The Natural Funeral. So it's very much honoring this process and composting the body and turning them into trees and creating, national organic remains from the bodies that are then gone and put into gardens, and things grow from the gardens. There's a movement afoot, that's growing around all of these principles, which is beautiful.
That is beautiful. I read recently about a community somewhere, I think Arizona, where they're building a wellness community that deals with death and aging. So everything, people move in there when they're relatively healthy, but then they know that this might be their last place they live, and they kind of have all these processes and teachings in place to deal with it. And it looks pretty interesting, better than, I guess, your typical nursing home situation, which could be pretty bad these days.
Yeah.
So the concept of no self, you brought up, life and death. How does that concept really impact our understanding of this process?
Yeah. That's kind of our nature, is, not to have a fixed self. But I'm being a little careful here, because I wouldn't want somebody to say, oh, well, we don't have a self anyway, so, dying doesn't really matter because nothing is really happening. And that's not really a valid, it's not really a helpful perspective to sort of focus on no self when you are focusing on taking care of a self that's aging. So I just, with that kind of proviso, we could just say that, we are always changing. We don't have a fixed self. So there might be some solace in that, is that, it's not as black and white as we think it is, right?
Yeah.
It's not as black as white as we think of it. That's the solace. But I wouldn't like use that as some kind of a, I don't know, coping mechanism or something around the process.
I agree, and it does get a little confusing too when I read about this, and I'm like, wait, no self, but I have a body, that's me, and my body's going to get old and die. But maybe other things will live on. There's other continuations. I know that Buddhists talk about continuation a lot, and how the teachings of whether you're a Zen master or just a parent or whatever, it's ongoing. There's a lot of times when I hear my mom in my head now, and I can't pick up the phone and call her, but I have 50 some years of lessons of my life that came from her, and I think that's kind of how I'm going to try and approach the next 20, hopefully 30, 40 years of my life, is trying to, deal with it myself, but also help people, my kids and my friends and stuff as I get older.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where there is such benefit in maintaining a practice as we get older, as we meet that moment. And, we've all heard stories and perhaps even seen and been a part of good deaths and bad deaths, you could say. There's those deaths where the person is just really fighting the process. And then there's deaths where people have, they just appear to really, really accept the process. And, I'm mindful of a Zen teacher in my lineage who passed away about 10 years ago. And reputedly, her final words were, the wonder.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. as she passed over. And we have a lot of, near-death experiences and even after-death experiences with people who reputedly, had some sort of experience of that bardo state. And the accounts are, uniformly of great love, and great bliss, in that zone. And we have teachings from the Tibetan Buddhist traditions about the bardo and that afterlife, phase. So I think it's to move into that process with curiosity and with acceptance
Yes.
and with that kind of openness to, okay, what's next, is perhaps the best we can ask for. And I think a good, result will come from that. And that's what Buddhist training, that's what practice is all about too, is sort of to face everything with that. It's like, okay, accept this, and what can I make of this?
It's inevitable, and it's going to happen. So yes, I got to make it as best I can for myself and other people. And I just think it's an ongoing process too. As I said at the beginning, this also, when you're a teenager and you're changing and you're getting older. And I'll give you a quick example. I know you play a lot of soccer these days, and it's super impressive. I retired from playing pickup basketball years ago because my body was like telling me, hey, you know what, you're going to get hurt if you keep playing rigorous basketball games. And that was like something I had to let go of. I love basketball. My body was saying maybe you should quit. And so I'm like, okay, I had a good run and I played a lot of ball in my time, and now I'll hang it up. And I think that as I've gotten older, I've accepted those things, right? It was hard to do because it was a big activity in my life, but it's changing. And so something else I know will happen where I might have to give up something, riding a bike or something later on. And it's hard, but I think that knowing that that's the acceptance, as you said, knowing that it's going to happen and preparing yourself for it is really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And then to have that spirit of, well, what's next?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
So I don't know if you filled in the basketball with anything. I haven't been as courageous as you. I can't let go of my soccer playing, but
it's great that you're still playing. I love that. So I also think about, as you deal with getting back to parents and things like that, it's also just the more you learn from each passing, the more you can apply it to the next one. There's going to be someone else is going to pass away that I care about. It's going to happen. So how do I learn the lessons from my parents? And my father passed 16 years ago, and I certainly dealt with it, my mom, a lot differently. And I credit therapy and Zen teachings and Buddhism because I learned a lot over that time. And so next time something else happens, I'm going to apply what I learned from dealing with my mom. And then one day it'll be me. So is that kind of what you're going through too with your parents?
It is. And the learnings aren't conceptual. That's what I would say. The learning is experiential. So really the basic, invitation is to just be fully present with a person who's dying and with your own emotions, and then to take care on a day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute basis, breath to breath dimension of taking care wisely and heartfully with the process, with both yourself and the other person, and then you're internalizing it. It's not a conceptual kind of lesson learned. It's the actual, I'm learning to be with life.
I also believe that this practice has some preventative qualities to it in terms of physical illness. I think mindfulness, meditation really do help you maybe, I don't know for sure, maybe avoid certain things over time. And so I think about that too, is that maybe my body being more relaxed and it can deal with, or if I do get somewhat sick or something happens, then I meditate, mindfulness, rest, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so I do think like over time that it could help you with the physical parts, because I do believe in psychosomatic illnesses too.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we would have to make generalizations, but I think generally, the way you're working with your body physically, with your chi energy, and with even your immune system, you're creating more harmony and more flow on a basic physiological level that will, in general, of course, everybody's got their own karma and physiology and such. So it's not for everybody. But generally, meditation practice supports physiological health.
I think the immune system is really one of the biggest areas. I'm sure there's studies on this. They'll probably be pretty interesting to look up about the effect of meditation and mindfulness on your immune system.
Yeah.
Because I do believe the opposite is true too, that some people who are always anxious or stressed or whatever, they tend to get sick more often.
Stress is a killer. It
Stress
really
is a
is.
killer. Yeah. And so, yeah, so it's interesting. I think that this has been a great conversation, and I think it also leads up to how do we plan our next couple months to a year, and how do we change some of our behaviors, because this thought is in my head. 2024 is a big change and transition year. So how do I learn from everything that went down this year and go into next year with, more health, and better practices?
Mm-hmm. You asking me?
Well, I said I was asking myself, and now I'm asking you.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Are we going to talk about this now, or are we talking about this on another episode? Or
We're going to talk about another episode, but I just
Okay.
wanted to point out, like, I assume that you're in the same boat too, where everything that's happened this year in terms of dealing with your parents and dealing with yourself aging, that's also helped you prepare for the future and next year.
Yeah, definitely so. I think, I'm doing some reflection on the past year. Not so much lessons learned as what was the wisdom unfolding through the year, like, and at the end of the year, it's more clear to me, I think, what was going on, putting that in
Yeah.
quotes, what was going on, which I didn't always know from being in the middle of it. But, at the end of the year, it's like, oh, I kind of see this pattern that unfolded, for me and my family over the course of the year.
Yeah.
And then to look forward and like, okay, what are my intentions for like developing or working with things? Because we don't know what's going to happen, right? You don't know circumstantially what's going to happen, but we can with some sort of sense of like where we're at in life and what we want, right? Where our intentions and our aspirations are, what we'd like to manifest, right? So that's kind of the way I work with it. How about you?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think, it's very similar. And also just the unknown aspect of life is just so unpredictable.
Yeah.
And I think you said something to me earlier that we didn't know a year ago when we were doing this podcast. We didn't know like these things are going to happen this year. And I also just think about from like a society perspective, I see at the end of the year, they always have the list of people that died in 2024. And I was, a lot of these people like, wow, a lot of people passed, right? So we didn't know any of that. And there's going to be a whole new list at the end of this year. All right. And so, but we don't know, but we can prepare ourselves for any inevitability. That's, I guess, the point here is that we need to be prepared for ourselves and our loved ones and society for this to happen to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And the best way to be prepared is to be present.
Yeah.
Be present with your life as it is.
Yeah. And I also just want to point out, learning from other people and seeing how they deal with it is really an important thing that I want to leave our listeners with today, is that there's a lot of different ways that people deal with, sickness, aging, death, and some of it's admirable and respectable and amazing, and some of it's not so. And so I think that I look at every situation and think, how can I just add to my practice and get better at this? So it's an ongoing process for me.
It is a process. Can I add another feather in that quill? Is I think, was it Mike Tyson who said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face?
Yes.
So I actually feel like aging and, old, real aging is kind of like that in a way. Yeah. It's like, you can have a plan, but it's really hard when it really hits you. So again, it's about being present, being willing to let go and practice and letting go of your control, I think, is the best preparation.
So one more quick joke about my mom, joke from my mom. She used to say, getting old is not for sissies.
Yeah.
And she told me that she's like, your grandmother used to say this all the time. And she's like, now I'm saying it to you. And it was actually, she would be getting out of my car and she'd be like, struggling to get out of the car. And she's like, getting old. And so then I started saying to her before she said it to me, I'm like, have a good night, Mom. I'm like, getting old is not for sissies.
Yeah.
And then she's like, you're right. She would turn around and wave goodbye. And it was like kind of a routine that we had. but it's also a lesson. You know, you got to
Yeah.
be tough and you got to deal with it. And the better you have that mental capacity to deal with it, I think the better it goes. So that was inspiring to me.
That's really beautiful, Scott. I feel the spirit of your mother and my parents, in
Yeah.
our conversation here today, and I'm really thankful for all of them.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing what's going on with your folks, and I wish them the best in this year. And I know it's hard for you to deal with it, and they're all the way back on the East Coast. So I hope that you can spend as much time as possible with them.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great episode. As I mentioned, our next episode coming up soon, we're going to talk about the future in 2025. Just wanted to wish everybody a happy and healthy new year, and we appreciate you listening. Paul, any final words before I close it out?
Happy New Year to everybody. Yeah, and all of your comings and goings.
Cool. And as usual, check out Paul at zenatwork.org. Sign up for his newsletter. He's an amazing coach, and get in touch with him if you want to talk about that. And we appreciate your listening, and check us out soon with a new episode. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.